What I want to do in this vlog is discuss the differences between a miter saw and a sliding miter saw. See, the saw on the right side is just a miter saw. It has no slide. The blade goes down. It kind of chops the wood, whatever angle you're at. It'll cut the wood. And it does a nice job. It's precise, but it doesn't do very wide pieces of wood. Whereas the saw on the left is a miter, sliding miter saw. It's also a miter saw, but it's a sliding miter. And it'll handle wood up to maybe 11, 12 inches wide. One on the right, on the other hand, will only handle about 5 inches wide. So you can see there are applications, pieces of wood where you'd want a precision mitered cut. Perhaps a crown molding, or even a wide base molding, where the slide would be much more useful than a plain miter saw. Both of them are angled. Both of them will do compound angles. In other words, they'll bevel as well as miter. Now, I measured the sliding miter saw, and it'll handle roughly about 12 and 3/4 of an inch when it's the blade is slid all the way out, like I'm doing here. You lower that blade down in there, you're going to be able to handle about 12 and 3/4 inches, somewhere in that range, depending on the thickness of the wood, for the blade to completely cut through without leaving any part uncut. The plain miter saw, on the other hand, just goes straight up and down. It doesn't have any slide action. So whatever the thickness of your blade is exactly what it'll cut. In this case, it looks like about 5 1/4, 5 1/2 inches, depending on, again, the thickness of the wood, so that it'll completely cut through the wood without leaving any part uncut. In my case, I happen to have the luxury of owning 2 saws. The one on the right, the regular miter saw without the slide, I've owned for probably about 12, 13 years. Cost me about $87, $90, something in that range when I purchased it. One on the left, the sliding miter saw, I paid a bit more. I don't recall exactly what I paid, but it's about maybe 2 years old. And I've used both for cabinetry. I use both actually quite a bit. The one on the left I have permanently fastened down to my workbench. The one on the right I use to throw in the truck and becomes a mobile miter saw. So I use it quite a bit more actually than the one on the left. You can see here, and I'll swing the camera around here, you can see that I've installed these wooden blocks, which are pictured right here on the ends. There's one there, and if you go this way, you'll see there's one there. And they represent, it's a 2x4 turned on its side and mounted into the workbench. And that represents the same height as the work surface on the sliding miter saw, which is permanently mounted. So that I can just lift lumber up and place it on top of the saw for cutting. I'll demonstrate. And you can see that it sits on there neatly across the surface. Now that board's a little warped, so there's a little raised edge on this side. But it makes it very handy for shop work, where I don't want to set up a saw and tear it down each and every time I'm doing some work. And I've used this for projects where I could put the finished pieces in my truck and carry them to the job site. Either saw is handy to have. They both have a useful purpose. The luxury, as I said, that having 2 of them allows me to carry one with me, and I can leave one in my shop. I don't really need the slider out on the work site so much. The regular miter saw generally will take care of the type of work that I do. As you can see, the straight miter saw, as well as the slider, both fold down. I've folded down the arm, the saw arm, on the miter saw so that you can see, and it becomes very portable. I can pick it up by the handle that's part of the saw at the top, and I can just move it with me very easily. It weighs probably about maybe 35 pounds. Both the saws have an aluminum base so that they're relatively light, and you can use the portability sometimes. Comes in handy. You're out on a job where you've got a few pieces to cut up there that you can't figure back at the shop. Like I say, picking this up, taking it with me, putting it in the truck, and carrying it to the job is a vital function. Another nice feature, the miter saw, this particular one, has a set of arms that slide out so that you can actually carry weight out at a distance away from the edge of the table here. And it also has a stop built into it so that if you determine the distance between your blade and this stop and you set it up and lock it down like this, you can actually cut the same identical length of board each and every time. And there is the same on the other side. You can slide the arm out and you can lock it down. It also has a stop on in case you're cutting on this side from the blade. You can do that. You can lock this down in any position just like that, and then it becomes unmovable. You can put your boards across here with or without the stop in place so that you can cut lengths if you don't happen to have a setup like I do with my elevation boards at each side. Like I say, I set this saw up, this particular one, for my workbench to be stationary, and I really don't use these extendable arms on this model. But you could convert this over to a portable model, take it out, set it up on a table, and use it just almost as well as you could here in the shop because of these extension arms. And you can see that the saw also has a high back here if you're doing an extra wide crown molding, and you want to set the material up on an angle. I don't have any crown molding here, so I can't demonstrate. But you've got this extra height here, which does slide. There is a lock here. You can slide this back across and get it closer to the area where you're working, lock it in. And then you have the ability to put your crown molding on here and have it backing here at this location. And as you can see on the other side, let me swing the camera around a little bit. And I don't know if you can make out, but over on the back here there are some increments so that you can measure from the blade over if you want to use this. It's not as good as just plain old-fashioned ruler and pencil, I've found. If you want accuracy, there's nothing like using a fine sharpened pencil and a good tape measure. The other thing, both of these saws have a dust bag in the back which collects quite a bit of the debris. However, you're not going to be able to collect all of it. You're still going to have to vacuum and dust around the saw periodically to keep it free and clear so that your wood lays flat on the table, and also so that the rotating miter part of the saw works correctly, it doesn't get sawdust down inside. You really need to vacuum and keep these clean.